Hey there, welcome to the channel. Today, let's make a gluten-free New York style crumb cake. You know the kind. It's about that much cake with about that much topping. The topping is buttery, sweet, and full of cinnamon. I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So please consider hitting subscribe and let's get started. So before we get to baking, let's go over some initial recipe notes. This recipe comes from Chef Alina at chefalina.com. I will link down below to the full recipe. We are baking by weight today and not volume because that's how her recipe is written. The ingredient list will be listed below, but click over to the website for the full instructions. Her recipe does not state what gluten-free one-to-one flour she is using. Not always my favorite, guys. You know I like to have recipes that actually tell me what flour to use because they're all different. Today, we're gonna use Bob's Red Mill one-to-one. Usually you get pretty good results with this with recipes, so we're gonna try it with that. The recipe is not difficult, so let's get it put together. It's actually gonna take longer to bake and cool before I can eat it and take photos than it should take for me to put it together. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you also want to grease a 9x13 pan. I am using metal today because I think I'm going to get better conduction that way, and I think it's going to bake it better. You do want to grease the pan, and I am using shortening because I feel that shortening gives it better coverage. Use whatever type of grease that you prefer. So let's start with the dry ingredients for the cake. I've got 154 grams of the Bob's Red Mill one-to-one. I have 112 grams of granulated sugar. I have 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And if your baking powder has lumps in it, then sift it out because you want to make sure that it's distributing evenly throughout the batter, and that'll give you better results. I'm also going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to give everything a quick whisk just to blend it together, take out any additional lumps in the flour. Once it's all whisked, leave a well in the center for our wet ingredients. Now let's get our wet ingredients together. I've got 120 grams of milk. I'm using whole milk today. I don't see why you couldn't use your favorite plant-based milk or any other fat of cow milk. I also have 30 grams of a neutral oil. I'm using canola, but you could use vegetable or avocado or whatever kind of neutral oil that you like. I'm gonna add 1 large egg. Finally, I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Let's give everything a whisk. Everything's mixed, so let's take the dry ingredients and we're gonna pour the wet ingredients into that well we made. Let's give everything a whisk until it's relatively smooth. All right, let's put this to the side. We'll let it hydrate while we get our crumb topping ready. So I've got another bowl here. We'll see if this bowl is too small. And in that bowl, I have 260 grams of the Bob's Red Mill one-to-one. I also have 224 grams of brown sugar. I'm gonna add 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. Let's give that a good whisk to mix everything up and break up the brown sugar. Now we need to add the butter to the dry ingredients. Chef Alina suggests using a grater for this, so we're gonna try her method and see how it works. I'm gonna grate 2 sticks of butter into the dry ingredients. I'm gonna toss it around every little bit just to make sure that butter's coating the dry ingredients. And then once all the butter has been grated and it's in the dry ingredients, I'm actually gonna rub the butter and the dry ingredients together until it resembles a crumb and it's about the size of peas. Now, if you'll notice here, I actually have 2 different kinds of butter. I have 1 stick of salted, 1 stick of unsalted. So the topping doesn't have any salt in it, but the little bit of salt that's in this butter is not gonna hurt that at all. There's so much brown sugar in there that I think we're gonna be fine. It'll help balance out the flavor a little bit. So use the butter that you have. If you just have unsalted, of course, just use unsalted. It'll be fine. You don't need to add extra salt. Let's grate it in and see how it does. All right, I've got everything grated. It's got to be mixed in. Let's take a look at the grater. So that part of the grater is not too bad. Inside, I feel like I have quite a bit of butter. I've gotten most of it out, but I don't like that there's some of it that has gotten wasted in there. So not sure if I like this totally. Maybe if I just had like a single-sided one, that would have been better than a box grater. Let's get everything mixed together. Again, we are looking for pea-sized pieces of crumbs. So just get in there with your hands and just rub it through, and eventually it will come together. All right, so it looks like everything is pretty well together, and I can still break it up. So I like that. Let's get it into the pan so we can get it in the oven. Let's get it into the pan and spread it evenly. And the recipe says it may not look like enough batter, but that it is, and to not worry about it. So that's what we're gonna do. All right, so it's been spread around. We need to put the crumb mixture on the top, and Chef Alina says to start at the edges because it helps prevent the crumb from sinking into the cake. So I'm gonna do that. And my take on that as well is that once the sides are done, you can pile everything in the middle. I feel that it'll make everything a little more even. So let's do that. She also says it's gonna seem like there's too much topping, but that there is not. All right, so I've got it completely covered, and what I did is after I filled it over once, I went back over and tried to do the same thing, working from the edges to the middle, but I was looking for spots that I could see a little bit of batter shining through. Now we need to bake this. It's gonna bake from 35 to 40 minutes until the crumbs are golden and a wooden skewer, toothpick, comes out of the center clean, just like any other cake. Then you wanna cool it on a wire rack for at least 30 minutes, and just before we try it, we'll put a little bit of powdered sugar on top. Let's get this baked off so we can give it a taste. All right, it has been 40 minutes. I took it out at 35 and it wasn't quite where I felt like it should be. So let's do another test. It's coming out clean. Let's cool it down for 30 minutes, maybe even longer, and then we'll give it a taste. All right, so our cake has cooled off for about an hour now. Let's go ahead and take a look at it and see how it tastes. Here's a piece of the cake without any powdered sugar on it. Let's start with what I like. It did bake in the time it said. It took 40 minutes to bake. Toothpick came out clean. I thought it may have been done at 35 minutes, but I wasn't sure, so I did it the extra 5. Cutting it out of the pan, it did pretty good. It's not sticking to the bottom much, so I like that. It's nice and golden on the bottom, so that's another good feature with it. Let's talk about what I don't like so far. I don't like the rise. I wish it would have been a little bit taller, so I don't know if that's a more batter thing or if my pan, it didn't like the metal pan. I don't know, but I do wish it was a little bit taller because I feel like crumb cake should be. I also don't like the crumb on the top itself. I think that I had the pieces too small because I feel like the butter all melted and it's just a lot of solid crumb on the top instead of those big chunky pieces that you would see in a traditional crumb cake. Seems like I'm kind of 50-50 on the cake. Taste is always the most important, and especially gluten-free, sometimes I feel the taste is definitely worth it even though it may not look or act like a traditional recipe. So let's try it out and see. This piece does have the powdered sugar on it. It's baked all the way through. Let's try it. So taste-wise, I actually really like the crumb topping. It's a nice sweet taste. I like the cinnamon in it. It's buttery. The cake is okay. There's not a ton of it there, so I do like that because a New York crumb should have more crumb than cake. It doesn't taste right out on the cake part. The edges are a little crunchy, so maybe I should have taken it out at the 35-minute mark. It's definitely baked all the way through. Okay, so I've eaten the whole piece, so it can't be that bad. I will say it is not my favorite. Could be a little bit of my baking, could be a little bit of the recipe. I really like the taste of the topping. The cake part is okay. It doesn't really taste gluten-free to me. The thing I keep going back to is the rise of the cake. I actually would like a little more cake, and I would like my crumb on the top to be a little more crumb-like and not so melted looking. That could be absorption of the fat in the flour. It very well could be that. It could be that I worked it too much and really needed to make some big crumbles again. It could be that. Overall, it baked well. It was easy to make, so we have that going for it. Chef Alina has more recipes on her website, so there's some more worth trying. And just because this didn't come out for me, it may be fine for her. She doesn't say what flour she uses. I do not like that because all gluten-free flour blends, as you know, are not created equal. So I really do appreciate when a website or blog or wherever actually gives me the type flour to use, because they all work differently. All in all, I don't think this is a waste of a recipe. I think if you want that coffee cake New York style taste, I think this is one worth trying. Easy to make, easy ingredients, nothing crazy. Guys, what do you think of the recipe? Do you have a recipe that you think is better than this? Leave your comments below. Leave me a link to the recipe you think is better. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.